Joining us now is Jonny von Wallström, the director of the film Guldägget.
Weekend okay? Good? Bad? Let me just see. Internet seems a little bit weird today, so I turned down the quality a tiny bit. Hopefully that's gonna get it a bit smoother and not lagging, but let me know if anything happens and I can restart the encoder. Somebody asked me last time that I didn't have time to answer what I use to encode, or if I use a separate type of encoder, and we do. I have this Teradek Cube 501, I think it's called. It's actually a really good thing that we use it, especially when we have client monitors, for instance. So what you do is you hook that one up through SDI to your camera. Then it can wirelessly send the signals to, for instance, like this, live streamed, or to a device like an iPad or something like that. Or you just wire it straightly to a monitor in a different room. And that's a really easy way to get, for instance, when you do advertising, that's so nice to have. Because what happens if you have the client in the same room is that the tension, like the stress levels, becomes much higher. A couple of reasons for that. One thing that we have is we always have, like, our producer always sits in the client room just to take care of, you know, concerns that the clients have, and then that's communicated to us, so that it's not a straight discussion between, for instance, me as a director and the client. Oftentimes the producer talks to the first assistant director, that then talks to me about the concerns. So it's, you know, a lot of people in between, but the reason for that is that it becomes much easier to keep track and control of things. Like it becomes less stressful when you have that set up. So client monitor for clients, really important. Use it. Try to get them in a different room so that they're more comfortable, because then they can just sit around, hang out, have some snacks and all that. Otherwise, you can get a different feel on the set that's unfocused, and you can get, you know, annoyed with too many people talking. You have to tell people to turn off phones, all those things. You avoid them if you do stuff like that. And then for live streaming, I use it too. For this live stream, it's really good because it encodes everything, and you can set the quality, and it takes the SDI from the C300 Mark II, and then it just converts it into your signal. But I also record it that I upload afterwards. So that's basically how we do it. But sometimes it says, like now, not receiving a signal. But that doesn't have to do with the encoder, it has to do with this really crappy Wi-Fi from, 4G from Telenor. Telenor is really bad. It's the only thing I have though. Okay, so I have couple of questions that I posted in the community tab on YouTube that I thought I'd get to first. Let me just get those. Here we go. What do you think about the new community functions with, like, posting an image or posting questions directly to your YouTube community? And also like the polls. I really like the polls, because they're really effective. For instance, the poll we did in the beginning of the year, it's super interesting to see that you have like 40% of you voted for tutorials, 29% for documentaries, 22% for behind the scenes, and 7% inspirational, and 2% Q&A. Q&A is, I think, really good for the people that really want it. But it's also a thing that most people won't watch, and I get that. But it's also a way for us to upload one more time a week, and it gives the people that really care an opportunity to ask questions. I think Q&As are really valuable, even though it says 2% likes it. Yeah, but let us know what you think. about that poll? Is it as you envision it? Okay, so first question. I guess I've answered this before, but I can elaborate maybe a little bit on it. What's your next film going to be, and have you started filming it? I actually started filming it, was it? Yeah, a little over a year ago, actually. I think it was it a little? Yeah, must have been. Must have been before, or it was now maybe. No, I think maybe it was a little bit before Christmas, before there was a lot of snow, and then in the spring. The film is about 4 characters in the world, different parts of the world, that's somehow affected by the climate, or the like how angry maybe the world is with people. So you have, for instance, polluted places where people still live, but maybe they shouldn't, where you have arsenic and you have polluted water, you can't drink the drinking water, and then you have like dry places where you can't grow crops anymore, and then you have someone who's fled their home and relocated somewhere else in the world, and then you have somebody that's threatened, their livelihood is basically threatened if the capitalistic forces are allowed to do whatever they want. So basically you have this struggle of 4 people. It's not a very political film, it's not a very like social aware film in that sense that it's an activist film. It's more about like 4 destinies that you follow. I'm not so interested in making like an environmental film, for instance. I'm more interested in like going into the people's lives, seeing how they're affected, and then thinking for myself, but also for, I guess, people to watch it. I think they're much more interested if they're invested in the characters rather than the issue itself. Because if you focus on the issue itself, you're pretty much just preaching to the choir most of the time. So I try to avoid that as much as I can, and this film is no different. The idea is that we follow these 4 characters' lives, and then there's gonna be like a multi-protagonist narrative where you have 4 characters that are alike but also not so alike, and then you edit a story that's basically 1 character but it's constructed through 4 characters. I don't know, that might be too technical to be talking about, but that's at least the idea. And basically we maybe follow them for like 3 years or something like that. We've only started to follow 2 of them. So we've shot maybe, I think, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And then now we're in a stage where we're starting to apply for funding. So we don't have any funding yet. We've shot in, like, spread out over a year. We've shot in different, like spots where we've had time over in between jobs, and then we went and we shot, and then we came back and we edited a trailer, and yeah, that's where we're at basically at the moment. How did you decide you wanted to be a cinematographer? Basically by doing. I started studying digital post-production, basically like After Effects and that sort of stuff. A lot of rotoscoping and like 3D stuff and all that. And then I got uninterested in that, and then I moved on to starting to make more realistic things, because everything in the beginning was just like character animation, which I don't do anymore, but I used to do it. So a lot of green screen work, that type of stuff. And then I thought that was pretty boring, so I got more into cinematography, and I got more into that whole aspect of making films. And eventually, I guess I realized that it was photography that I was interested in, and I started studying photography, like still photography. Did that for a while. I also worked as a still photographer for a while, both in advertising and documentary and all that, and like working with bands and do covers for artists and that sort of stuff, and press pictures, all that. And then I eventually kind of evolved into making films. That's basically what I think interested me the most, because it has such a, like, everything I like is basically embodied in filmmaking. So everything from like music to visuals to audio to the feelings to storytelling. So that's probably why I got hooked into that and stayed true to it, because I mean, a lot of the time you kind of lose interest in anything you do, I think. And a lot of people that I studied with, I studied cinematography for a year, they don't work with cinematography anymore. And I think it's because you kind of have to find your space in it. And I did eventually in documentary. And that's the stuff that I like, the realistic type of narrative. But then cinematography is also, for me, like very controlled documentary storytelling. So even though it's realistic, I still want to be able to control and to light things and all that. And that's where I'm at now, and maybe close to fiction without doing fiction. So I want to work in a fictional way, but within documentary storytelling, because I like the characters and I like that I don't know and I can't decide everything. So that's what pretty much got me into cinematography. Yeah. And when I did do that for a while, like when I did cinematography for a while for other people, I realized that I wanted to direct. So I got bored with cinematography after a while. Okay, so what's the biggest obstacle you've had in your career? I know that, I think, maybe. Okay, one of them. This was pretty early in my career. Let me see, I was maybe 3 years out of film school. Yeah. And we made a film that got into Cannes. It was this short film that we made just with our own money. We had like small product placement, but that was pretty much it. So what we did was we went to the north of Sweden. We had gotten this super sick Alfa Romeo Spider 69 classic vintage car, a red one. We put that, I think, on a, I don't know, on a trailer or something, or if it was on a train or something. It got up to the north. We shot this film for, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. We've been on and off there to location scout and everything. It was this huge project, just like you would make a feature film, but we did it as a short, and we did it with our own money, basically. Because at that time I wanted to do fiction films. So we've written a script together, 3 of us. One director, and then me, a cinematographer, and then a writer. So all of us would co-write this script and then go up there and make it together. That whole process was pretty damn dreadful, I think, because the crew, not the crew maybe, but the actors, well, some of them was flown in like back and forth from Stockholm, because one of them was in a like a Broadway type of show, I don't know, something like theater, and then she was flown in just to shoot, and then one was living with us the whole time. Those were the 2 main characters, and they were fine and all, but then the crew, after a while, because it was such a chaotic thing where nothing worked, it was just like total mayhem. Like, we got there, the car broke down, they had apparently like fastened the handbrake too harshly, and then it had just gotten stuck, so the car was just smelling all the time during these 2 weeks, and like it was totally like miserable type of experience where one of the directors, because eventually all 3 of us directed this film, But one of the directors backed the whole trailer that we have with the equipment into another car, almost making somebody handicapped getting in the way, like totally miserable everything. That film eventually was finished. It was fine, I guess. It got into Cannes, and we thought that, oh, this is our big break. Now we're gonna make a feature film. We went to Cannes. We did this whole thing with like pitching to the commissioning editors and all that. Our idea was that we want to turn this into a feature film. Yeah. And at that time we thought that, yeah, we just need to make this film and everything will just be set, basically. And then what happened was that we got back. The person that we had gotten hooked, basically, at the Swedish Film Institute, which gives grants to filmmakers in Sweden, he stopped working there. So he just switched to somewhere else. So then you basically have to start over from scratch, because it's all about those connections. So all of a sudden we didn't have a connection to make our feature film. And then that started to like tip over to our company that we were running at the time, that was partly making like corporate commercial type of stuff. And we had bet everything on the film, and then a other project, like going together 5 people running a company. That means that you need to make a lot of money in order to run a company that's 5 people. So we thought that we would get the company going. We did not. Eventually we just had to put the company down and just go separate ways. And I had to get a job as a telemarketing salesman for a while. That's probably my biggest downfall so far in my career. And then start over, like making my own company, starting to work by myself. That's probably the most, the biggest mistake I made, but also what kind of made me go this way that I'm at now, where I'm doing it together with my brother, and we're doing a production company in a similar way that we were doing it, but it's more mature. So I don't know, you learn by those things, and then eventually you might find a way. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing so far. Other stuff is maybe smaller scale, but I went bankrupt at that time. That's why I had to start working with telemarketing and all that. So I had no money. We had a lot of money that we owed people because we made the film and invested everything in the film. We had to sell off all our gear, and yeah, bankrupt. Okay, so let me see. Hi Johnny, I know you already talked about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, but I would like to hear more. And now I own a Lumix GX80, and I'm thinking of selling it and buying a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. What is the best cheap way to stabilize Pocket's footage? Maybe Merlin Steadicam or something like that. Do you have some recommendation? And also some cheap wide lenses, maybe can be vintage. Because I think I won't have the money for a speed booster right now if I buy a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. Basically, I would like to hear a lot more about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. Are you still using one? I know some laser broke one of yours. Thanks. It did. So don't use a laser with a Pocket Cinema camera. To me, it's an amazing camera. I'd recommend it to anybody that knows how to expose an image and knows how to grade an image. Or at least knows the basic, because that's what you need if you work with a Pocket. Because it's crucial that you know how to kind of expose it correctly so that you avoid, for instance, high ISO. You should pretty much only be at 400, because otherwise it gets really noisy and it loses a lot of details and all those things. So as long as you kind of stick to that and use like light sensitive lenses, you should be fine with the Pocket. I love the camera. We got the GH5 because the people, foremost Andre, my brother, couldn't hold the camera still. So we got this properly exposed and okay footage all the time, but there was always micro shakes. So that's a thing you need to think about, but you've already thought about it because you're talking about stabilizing it. And that's crucial with the pocket, because if you don't have a rig, it's really easy that you get these micro shakes. And the more that you get tense, the more it shakes. So you basically need to be loose but firm when you're holding it handheld, and you should use a loop. Because if you kind of rest your arms on your body, now this is pretty basic, but I'll say it anyways, and then you hold the pocket and then you have like a loop thing, it's stable, but you have to not get tense. You have to be like firm grip, but then loose in your body, because that's what's gonna take the micro shakes out of the camera. The other alternative is, for instance, the Merlin, for instance, or the Skylar Mini Cam, I think we have. The Skylar Mini Cam is really nice because it's small, works perfectly with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. I always used to use it as a selfie stick also, because you can actually hold it up and then just like kind of twist it and then you hold it to your face. Yeah, I guess for me, I don't know what your budget is, but vintage lenses for it. I know a lot of people uses Nikon lenses with like Canon mounts and then the speed booster. If you can't afford that, I think you should probably look into the cheap and small micro four thirds lenses. Like, let me see, I have some, or do I remember? Like I have one from DJI, but I think that it's is it an Olympus one or a Panasonic one? Like 15mm. That one is good. I think there's one, like this might be a little bit too expensive, but any from Panasonic. If you already have the GX80, you probably have a lens with that one. But the 12 to 35 that is stabilized is really nice on the pocket camera because it's stabilized. It also has a decent focus ring. Most of the small micro four thirds don't have that, so it's really hard to focus by hand. I think the 1.7 20mm from Panasonic is a nice lens also. I use it as a small pocket type of lens. Anything from SLR Magic is amazing, but it's a little bit more expensive. But the 12mm from them is perfect. It doesn't have a stabilizer, but it has a really nice focus and it's super light sensitive. What else? I mean, any vintage glass that you can fit onto it is probably perfect if it's light sensitive and sharp. So look for, I mean, the Leica is probably expensive, but you can probably find the Canon lenses, the FD still lenses. Those are probably pretty easy to find, but I don't know if you can adapt them, because I have them for the speed booster. So you have the speed booster and then you have a Canon EF mount. So they're converted from the FD mount to EF mount. Yeah. Yeah, I think that might be it. Am I cutting out for anybody else? There's one comment here about it. Let me know. Okay. So, curly-haired Jew. Hey Johnny, wondering what you think of YouTube as a platform to showcase your work as opposed to submitting to film festivals. Like, this might piss off a lot of programmers at film festivals, but I see no point in posting stuff to film festivals long term. None. Like, they have to, if you build an audience online, if let's say you were Peter McKinnon and you would make a film, you wouldn't need a film festival. It's just useless if you would use a film festival. What you would do is pretty much collaborate with the film festival and demand things from them in order to bring your audience to the film festivals. that's a much better position to be in as a filmmaker. It's the same position that Michael Moore or any famous director is in. They can, demand to be in the program and all that. I don't think that, starting to send to festivals is a better way than to build an audience on YouTube. I think YouTube is much more efficient in terms of bringing leverage to your project and your career. There's like this big hype around the festivals that you might think would lead to something, but in reality there's so few that actually has anything happen after a film festival. We've been in the biggest documentary film festivals, and I'd say that nothing has happened off of that. I mean, we have a large network, and we can, talk to the buyers at HBO or Netflix or those people, but that doesn't help in the end, because you still have to start from scratch with every project. And this is the same for like any filmmaker. Basically doesn't have a leverage in that sense. If you don't have the name, the personal brand is worth much more than a film festival. And I think that if you focus on that instead of getting into a festival, long term, you're gonna have much more choices of what you want to do. If you do want to go to a film festival, you should do it on your terms and not on the film festival's terms. So if we choose a film festival, we might say, oh, let's not go to, for instance, Sundance, because we get put in maybe a program where nobody will see it or nobody will hype it. Or we might get to be the most important film at a different film festival, like Hot Docs. So you have to weigh those things, and if you have leverage, which you can if you use YouTube the right way, you really can do much more. And I think if you also want to get, for instance, to a level where you get into a festival and people want you to be on panels, because that's also a way to build your brand, and it's a way for you to network and all those things. And if you have a platform that's stronger than the festival, then you can do those things easy. And I think that's what we're looking at much more now than before. I actually went to Hot Docs when we had our world premiere at Hot Docs. I was on a panel, and we were supposed to like come up with something in terms of like what we learned from the film. We were 3 directors that were speaking. And then everybody has this theme of like what we learned. My thing was that I'm done with film, I'm leaving filmmaking, or I'm not gonna make another film, I'm going to start being a YouTuber, basically, something like that. That was basically what I officially stated in the festival. And I have since. I don't apply for festivals anymore. I think we will with the film eventually, but we want to make this platform successful first and then go there, because I think that it's so like after in terms of development and where the audience is. If you look at festivals traditionally, where they would, bring leverage, they still do in a way, but what they have is an audience, and what they have is a platform and a community that loves films and wants to go and watch films. But you have that on YouTube too. You don't need a festival to get that. So what I like about festivals is, for instance, the markets, the networking, all those things. Those I think are like priceless. But in terms of getting your work shown and getting your work out there, I think hands down YouTube will make much more sense. Especially if you do something like Jake Paul or, for instance, Casey Neistat or anybody like that. They have so much more leverage than any film festival in the world. And I wish these people would understand that, because if they would be able to do anything. They would get a brand on board and make their film or anything like that, and do whatever they like and have a cinematic tour or whatever, because the community is everything. And that's why I like and promote YouTube over festivals any day. And I think also a lot of people, they stare themselves blind with the whole aspect of getting picked up and distributed in a festival. But most of the time, the films that succeed, they're already picked up and they're already connected, and all that has happened before the film comes to the festival. They have a sales agent on board that's already set a plan for the fall that your film is coming out, and they've started to sell it even way before that. So there's a lot of things that you need to understand that isn't about getting your film into the festival. It goes on long before that, where you have to go to the markets and try to get people on board with your project, because that's how you get a successful festival run. It's basically, there are some films, like a friend of mine made a film that went to IDFA with us 2 years ago, I think. Yeah, because it's in November, so 2 years ago. 2016. She made this film that nobody wanted. Nobody wanted to buy it. Like, some people bought it, but for very little money, and nobody believed that it would be this universal hit. It won the audience award at IDFA, and then all of a sudden everybody's interested. Those things do happen, but you can't plan for them. It's a total random thing, and the competition is like, it's so hard to understand if you haven't been there. But any film in the main program at a festival, that is like the 5 films or whatever you have, any of those can win. It doesn't matter, any of those can win, depending on the jury and all that. All of them are great films. So that's the hard part about like focusing on a festival, because everybody's good that's at a festival. So sticking out can be a little bit hard, and it's much more about the politics than it is about the other stuff, unfortunately. Yeah. Dude, your accent, where are you from? Sweden. Stockholm right now, but not previously. Gävle. Sandviken. Represent. Okay, can you suggest some free online courses for video editing? We should make one, but let me see. Did Matty do one on that? Let me see. Travel fields. Maybe he has. I mean, courses in general, anything from Linda, Creative Live is probably, you can find a lot of stuff there. Like, Linda has been my go-to place earlier. I haven't used it for a couple of years, so it's not something that I'm very into right now. But other than that, I think Creative Live has so much focus around the person, like they're practicing stuff, like it would be real editors that teaches you it. I think that's a really good thing. You should probably look to those more than anything else. So let me see here. No, Matti has not made one. But Creative Live, great resource. If you haven't already used it, you should. I think Masterclass, those series, is probably also worthwhile checking out, but I think they're much more theoretical than practical. I think that a lot of the good stuff that's on Creative Live, for instance, it's very practical advice most of the time, and it's very good structure. You can like go through modules sometimes, and you can pick, for instance, I know there's one from Chris Burkhardt which goes through his whole photography process, and you have, for instance, anything from like location scouting until basically working with clients and getting discovered and all that. And I think that's, you know, a much deeper way of learning. But in terms of editing, there should be something there. I'm not sure which ones though. I'm wondering if I'm cutting out or not. Let me know, because nobody said anything. Let me just update and see. Health is good. It seems good. How to develop better storytelling. Let me get this up. I have something written on this, I think. Topics, drafts. Here we go. Topics. No? Where'd it go? Here. Okay. So let me just run through these quickly, because this can take forever, or it can take 2 minutes. I mean, when you study storytelling in general, there's so much more than, for instance, the cinematic part of it. And I think too many people, they focus on the cinematic narratives that are out there. There's so much more in terms of like dialogue, for instance, what's being said and what's not being said. When you look at storytelling, you should think about it as you should not say anything, basically. You should be able to make a film that doesn't say a word about the story, and you should still understand it. And when you then put dialogue on, like for instance, if you think about a Tarantino type of film, when he puts dialogue on, it's not about telling you the story that the film is about. It's about layering things and making it more complex and interesting, and in a more philosophical way. And that's how you should approach narratives in general. When you look at storytelling, most people that do YouTube, I think, focus too much on showing everything. And for instance, if you talk about an apple, you see an apple. And in the TV world, we make fun of that as being, you know, I don't know what it's called in English, but in Sweden we have a word for it that's Apple TV. And that's just because you show an apple if you talk about an apple. That's not what you should do. That's something that people make fun of, and that's all you see on YouTube. So it should be more complex than that. So if you talk about an apple, maybe you see a bird. I mean, you have to connect things and make them more complex and more interesting than that, and to tell stories that are deeper than what you can see with your eyes, for instance. So if you see a couple that is fighting, you should see something in there that is maybe the opposite. Maybe it's about love. Maybe that's the story. So if you see a fight, you think that the first time you see it, and then, you know, the more you learn the story, the more advanced your way of looking at it is, and the more you see depth within it. I think those things are really important. And I mean, for me, the most important thing is probably to bring emotions into a viewer, and to think about, like, how do you do that with all the elements that you have. It is partly maybe about like music, but to me, I want to avoid music as much as I can. If you can tell a story without music and without dialogue and still bring emotions into a viewer, that's what you should aim for. Because then when you put dialogue and you put music on top of that, you know, it's gonna fly even more. But don't build a story around, for instance, music as a carrier of mood or feelings, and don't build a dialogue that can explain everything, because that's not what you want to do. You want the music to kind of also be complex and add to the complexity of the story. And also with the dialogue, you also want the dialogue to contradict what the story is about, and you want to tell enough so that people follow along and are interested, but nothing more than that. You want people to, you know, have clues all the time, a little bit, little clue. Then eventually when they see the whole film, they understand it. You don't want them to understand it the first frame, like a lot of the stuff is, because that's boring. What else? I mean, that you have to practice a lot. You have to write it a lot. You have to try making films in that way. And if you want to learn more about script writing, I've recommended this before, but the Robert McKee has a book on story, which, I mean, it's really important because it talks about character arcs, character development, outlining, all those things. Once you learn those and the craft of writing scripts, you can, you know, stop thinking about it and write from the top of your head and by intuition. But you should learn it because it is a craft. And I focus a lot on character development. I think character is the most important thing in a story. You should cast the right people that can embody the story that you're trying to tell. So that's a really important part of it, to find, for instance, a character that has the location you envision, the conflict that you envision. They have to show all those things, and that can show the emotions that you envision. And it has to be complex. It can't just be like a shallow portrait of a person that just says that, oh, I felt so bad because I was raped, because nobody will care about that. It has to be more complex. You can't make it into like a victim type of narrative. Even though that's the hardest thing probably to go through in life, you can't tell the story that way. That's what a lot of activists do wrong, in my opinion at least. They approach things in a very emotional way, and I think you have to avoid that and tell a story. For instance, if I tell a story about racism, which I care a lot about, I wouldn't tell it in a way that maybe a black person that's been affected by racism would, because I'm distant to it. And that's why certain stories shouldn't be from the community, and certain stories should be from the community that is trying to tell it. But it's more complex than that. The reason why I think nobody else could have made the film The Pearl of Africa but a Ugandan black trans woman is because I had, a story idea where I listened to what she wanted to do, and I tried to tell her story in the way that she wanted it to be told, but I filtered it through my eyes because I wanted it to reach broader than the community that she was in. And that's where it succeeded, I think. And that's how I look at it, at least. Not to say that any black person couldn't have made the exact same thing, but what was happening within the Ugandan context was that too many people was too focused on the activism part of it, and they couldn't make the connection to love that we made in the film. They made a lot of the victimized type of stories about being gay in Uganda, and I think that has had its place, but at the time when we made the film, there was much more craving from the community and from Ugandans to see a film that didn't make that type of connection, that didn't, for instance, threaten the homophobic people. I think that would have made the opposite effect. Like, people would care less, or people would just like, no, I don't want to see it. But if you make it about love that we made, it's easier for them that hates them, basically, to maybe accept it. Maybe, baby steps. And then when you edit the film, try to do it without music, as I mentioned before, because if you can build a story around the narrative structures that are already in a scene, for instance, you have a tempo and you have a mood that's brought through sound design or through the narrative structures that you create within like visuals and all those things. If you can focus on that first and then add music, you're gonna have a much stronger story in the end. Okay, those things, I think. Start there and evolve. Maybe one final thing. I think also think about like how you want to structure the film, because a lot of people miss the opportunity of like going back and shifting the focus. For instance, if you start with one character, you shouldn't be afraid of just like, no, didn't work out, let's choose somebody else. You have to think about that in documentary storytelling, that you need to be able to be brave enough to start one thing and then leave it. And that goes, through the whole process of editing and everything. Don't fall in love with your own ideas. You have to be able to kind of look at the story in an objective way. For certain people, I think that's not possible, so then you should probably have an external editor that's not been you working within the project. I don't consider myself to be in that emotional state when I look at my own material, and I think that has to do with me being an editor for other people. I don't have any problem throwing any stuff out of a picture because it's not working, because I always when you work as an editor, you learn how to communicate with the audience and the people that are involved within the project and all that, and try to get feedback, and from the feedback you rarely get the solution to the problem, but you get an indicator that something isn't working. If people start getting bored by this, or they come with ideas of, no, I don't like this character, that's an indicator that something's not working. It's not an indicator that you should just throw it away, but you should probably develop it and try to find out why is it not working. And you shouldn't take people's advice, I think, of solutions if you don't believe in them yourself. If you do believe in them, take them and make them even better. But just because somebody suggests something doesn't mean that it's right. But it's probably an indicator that something isn't working that they're touching on. Yeah. Okay, so next question. I want to get more into color grading. I only see 100 and I don't shoot enough on Canon log to be grading, but this year I'd like to learn more. Where do you recommend starting with this process? Here, maybe? We're gonna start making some films about grading and everything, but I think you need to decide, like, where do you want to start? Is it like, do you want to get into DaVinci Resolve, or because that's the professional way of grading, or do you just want to start grading with like simple LUT type of grading tools like Film Convert, or like the Lumetri plugin in Premiere, for instance? Ooh, so much water. It's like I peed myself. Oh, damn it. Luckily the computer was saved. This time at least. Okay, so DaVinci. I think for DaVinci, I think it's an amazing tool, and it can be a little bit difficult to kind of understand it. I've actually made a couple of videos on it. Let me see if... Where is it? We don't have a basic one. I should probably make a basic one, because we're thinking of making like short tips also for DaVinci, but we should probably start by making a one that is more basic, and like, where do you start? If you haven't graded in DaVinci Resolve, how does it work? We should make one on that. But other than us, I think that... Let me just see. Maybe I can get some ones. LearnColorGrading.com is one source that you should check out. Learn color grading. If you just YouTube learn color grading, I think their channel is really good. They have a lot of basic and advanced grading things. You should check them out. You should probably check out, is it Casey Farris? Yeah, Casey Farris. Also one. All of them are really, good color grading sources. I think those, if you check out those, you're probably gonna have more than enough to start learning from. Just take like a crash course type of thing, and they're probably gonna show you most of the stuff that you need to know. I think Casey Farris also has even more on like editing and that sort of thing, so that can be good if you want to do both. I actually switched to DaVinci Resolve for both editing and, I mean, I graded there before, but I switched to editing and also sound design because I want it in the same place. I think it's a really good, it has amazing potential. DaVinci Resolve saves me so much time. There's certain things that I really dislike about it. For instance, it can't seem to work with my isotope audio plugins. It just crashes. That's really annoying. But other than that, I mean, to have an option of just like flicking to the next, I don't know what you would call it, switch, window, whatever, in the same NLE program. To do that and have so advanced features as Resolve, that's, you know, amazing. It saves so much time in terms of everything from editing to post-production with grading and everything. So yeah, I recommend it. I've used both Premiere and Final Cut before, and none of them made it through the cut. Okay, so maybe this will be the last question. Hey dude, no, there we got more Resolve. Let me take the Resolve first then. Why do you find it to be the best for both worlds, editing, and better than Premiere and Final Cut? Mainly, I think it's better because it has everything on a level that's so professional. What Final Cut and Premiere doesn't have is the grading tools that are professional. I mean, you can struggle and grade and everything, but you don't have the precision that Resolve has. And in terms of editing, I think that they're similar. All of them have, you know, it's good and they're bads. But overall, the editing features in all of them are similar. I wouldn't say any is better than the other. I think if you like Premiere, you probably like it more because you like the UI. If you like Final Cut, it's because of the UI more than it is anything else. Performance-wise, I can get it to work the same. But then in terms of audio, I think most of them work kind of similar. For instance, if you would work in the Adobe suite, you would have audio that works, but it's really easy to just, you know, move in between these windows and just like go into that, do your settings on the audio, go back, continue editing, because a lot of the projects you go back and forth. And for instance, you can have a sound mix that is, for instance, pretty much done, but then you need to make some changes in the editing, and then maybe some grading thing or whatever it is. And to have it in one program is worth more to me than to have, for instance, I love the way Final Cut 10 worked. It was really efficient until you got over 30 minutes. So it took an hour for me to open my project when I did the Pearl of Africa. That's what mainly made me leave Final Cut, because I really liked the magnetic timeline and everything. It really saved me a lot of time, I think, in terms of editing. But the events and like how much time it took to read the project was just, I just had to leave it. Because in terms of the metadata functions, they're pretty much similar, all of the programs, I think. So all the logging is pretty much similar, the performance is similar, the editing, like how much do you need? You need the eraser and you need some shortcuts on your keyboards. It's not like, you know, the editing features are much different. One annoying thing is that the GH5, when I use the tentacle sync with Resolve, it doesn't sync automatically, or it does, but then when you send the project to somebody else, like the DRP files, it doesn't have the connection anymore. So there's those type of stupid things, but all programs have that. In some way, you always have the stuff that you have to work around. Premiere, I think the main reason for me not liking it has to do with the grading being so much less advanced. So yeah, I'd still had to use Resolve if I would use it, and it just saves me time not to have it be a different program and have to, you know, go back and forth. Because what happens often, even though it's really good, the XML files that you can send in between doesn't work as fluent as having it in the same program, and always something falls apart, something disappears, always happens. Okay, so last question. Hey dude, I love your channel. How can someone get into the film industry? How should I go about learning cinematography and video editing? You should do, and then you should do, and then you should do. You have to make. Start doing short films, start playing around with, I mean, anything. I think start a YouTube channel, make stuff, network. Check out the last Q&A, because we talked a lot about like how to get into the film industry in that one, in terms of like how you should assist people, how you can look to work at a rental house and all those things, because they are a way for you to learn how to get into the industry and get a better network and that sort of thing. I think that's really important. If you can do that, you're gonna have a really easy way of getting into the industry when you have the network. Then it's just about practicing as much as you can and getting better and better. Maybe assisting somebody, editing something, do stuff for free. Don't be afraid of doing that. Get an extra job if you have to pay your bills. But yeah, check out the last Q&A if you want to know more details about like how to get into the film industry, because we talked a lot about that. But then learning cinematography, I think there's a lot of interviews with famous cinematographers that you can probably check out. But foremost, I think that you should watch films and analyze them in terms of the cinematography. And then try to make stuff that's similar. Try to learn that way. I think cinematography is so practical, and there's so much to it in terms of light and practicing and like learning how to move a camera by doing it. So you have to pretty much learn it by practicing. And I think a really efficient way, for instance, if you're talented as a photographer or anything, and then you want to be a cinematographer, you can definitely just start working with a gaffer, for instance, who knows film lighting. You can learn so much by working with them as an assistant, for instance. If they assist you and light your stuff, you can get much better result by doing it that way. But find people to collaborate with that are talented, but that are still starting out like you are, maybe. And yeah, buy a camera is probably the best way to learn. Buy a camera and a computer so that you have the stuff and can make stuff. Your ideas have to be made and not be stuck in your head, because then nothing will happen. Kind of basic, but you get the point. Okay, that will be it for this week. Let me know if you still have any questions. Ask them and I'll get to them next week. Okay, take care. Thanks for tuning in. Bye bye.